Thank you guys all so much for watching Zen Speaker Breaking the Silence. I am so lucky to be here today with the filmmaker and the subject of the film who you just watched all about, so you know exactly who we're with. So it's Amy Ayoub and Robin Greenspun. So thank you ladies so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Robin, I just wanted to get started with you as the filmmaker, asking how you guys connected. How did you first meet Amy, and what has this project really meant to you?
I actually knew Amy for many years in her role as a political fundraiser. And she and I worked on events together. She did several events at our house. So we knew each other. We were acquaintances. I wouldn't say we were friends, but we talked whenever we saw each other, but just sort of socially. And a few years ago, a friend of mine said, I want you to come to a luncheon. I want you to hear Amy Ayoub speak. And she said, she's got a story to tell that you really need to hear. And I thought, well, I like Amy. Why should I come to the luncheon though? I mean, just, give me a little more information. She said, I'm not going to tell you anything else except that it's going to blow your mind. So I took her on her word, went to the luncheon, and needless to say, I heard Amy's story because this was actually the first time she had spoken in front of a social group in Las Vegas and told her story. And needless to say, my mind was blown. I turned to my friend afterwards and said, I think this is my next film. I just have to convince Amy of that. And it took several months for the opportunity to come up where I reached out to Amy actually on Facebook. I always kid that I stalked her on Facebook. And I had seen that she was thinking about writing a book. She mentioned something in a post that indicated that she was thinking maybe it was time to write a book. And I thought, okay, this is the perfect opportunity. And I got in touch with her, and she answered pretty quickly, but she was about actually to go into some major surgery. She said, we'll talk after I recover from my surgery. So, and we did. And I'll let her talk more about what happened after that. But it was, as soon as I heard her speak, I knew that more people needed to hear her story. She's phenomenal. You saw in the film how phenomenal she is, and her story just needed to be told.
Amy, first, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story with everyone. I know, as we saw in the film, it was a long process for you to get to that place, but I'm so grateful that you shared that. It was such a powerful story. When our programming team watched this, we right away were like, we have to include this in the festival. This is, you're an incredible woman. So thank you, Robin, for making this film, and thank you, Amy, for sharing your, very personal story with us.
Thank you. I have to say, I don't think if it wasn't Robin, I don't think I would have done it. It was not, even though I had mentioned something about a book, it was really one of those things where people kept telling me after I testified, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. And so I did it as a New Year's resolution, which another one I wouldn't keep, right? and said something, but I'm glad I did because it got Robin's attention. And the last thing I thought I ever wanted was to be on film and to be interviewed, just go through that process. It wasn't on my radar at all. And if somebody else had asked, I wouldn't have done it. But Robin, just what I knew of her already, but certainly when we talked, there was just it was a safe, I just felt safe. And I knew that even if it was overwhelming to think of doing a book, I knew there was still more to say, and I needed to get out. And this made it much easier on me because she told the story. That was very difficult for me to tell. It was a chaotic life, right? So to make sense of it was difficult.
Yeah. What have your experiences been like being on camera, telling your story on film versus giving all of the public and workshop talks that you've given?
Well, it's certainly different when I'm giving my workshops and my classes that are on speaking, right? It's not my personal story that I'm telling. So that's easy breezy to do for me. When I first told my story, when I testified, in 2013, I was doing that. Everything I told my students to do and all the excuses I heard them give me why they couldn't do it, I was that person, I was that student to myself, that because when it's so raw and so personal, it's just different than creating a speech that you're going to give, you know, about a subject that isn't that personal. So that was definitely different. For the film, again, because of the trust, if it was somebody else where I wasn't that comfortable, it wouldn't have been the movie. Because I would have been on stage. And that's what I didn't want. What I tell my students all the time is to be authentic, to be conversational, to be yourself, and that's enough. That's what people want, right? It's when we think we have to be perfect. But when that camera's in front of you, that's what you would tend to do. Do I look like, you know, do I look perfect? Do I look as perfect as I can? And with Robin and I, it was always just a conversation with her between the two of us. And I hope you saw that it was, yeah, you might not guess from some of those interviews that I'm a public speaking coach. It was pretty raw.
I have to insert here that it did take me almost a year to get her in front of the camera. Her what we fondly refer to as the blue shirt interview, which is the heart of the film when she tells her story. I kept saying, when do you want to do your interview? And she said, well, you know, I want this and that, and you know, and it just kept going on and on. I did almost all the other interviews, pretty much had finished all the interviews.
I kept thinking of other people. Oh, you have to interview this other person.
And so by the time we got to that day, well, she finally said to me, well, I didn't give her an ultimatum, but I finally said, you know, we really need to get you in front of the camera. She said, okay. And she called me a few days after that and said, I'm ready. And I think you'll be happy I waited, because I'm ready to tell you things that no one's ever heard before. And I think she surprised herself that day too, because she did tell stories that when we looked at the footage later, she said, I didn't remember telling you that.
Yeah, there were times that I said, you know, I really want to get that point across about such and such. And she's like, we did. And it just all came out that day. It was funny to me, maybe not to anybody else, but when that day I cried, I was raw. It was really emotional, and it was almost out of body. And like I said, I didn't even remember some of the things I said. And as soon as it was over, I got so much energy. I got this rush of energy, and I perked up, and Robin and her crew just went, like they were just drained. So they had, you know, that was amazing too, is how much the crew took in. Robin might want to talk about that, since they were all male.
Oh, wow.
And,
yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, two quick things. We gave her the option, I gave her the option of doing that interview over 2 days, and she said, absolutely not. She said, whatever you get on this one day, that's it, I'm not doing this again. So we did. So it was a really long day, because she wanted to keep going. And at the end of it, the crew was just absolutely, we were all just wiped out, absolutely wiped out. And I think Amy is the one who asked the crew, what did they think after hearing all of this? And one of the cameramen said, I want to go punch someone right now. I want to go find a guy and punch him for all the men who have treated women like this.
Yeah. This reminds me, I did an interview with the filmmaker. I don't know if you guys have seen the film Love Mobile. It's a really beautiful film set in Germany, but they had a very similar experience as you guys. Might want to check that film out at some point. It's interesting. And on that note of like how these really powerful stories affect the film crew, Robin, how has telling this story and learning so much about this subject affected your life?
Well, the first thing is, thanks to Amy, I have an incredibly wonderful new circle of friends that are women that are the most empowered and amazing women I've ever met, who were kind enough to open up and tell their stories. But even beyond that, just the people that I've met through Amy and through telling the story, I'm always in awe of the bravery, you know, of the courage, and just the fortitude of these women and men who just, you know, they just keep going. This becomes part of their story, but it's not their story. I mean, Amy's a perfect example of that. Her story doesn't end with this, you know, with what happened. That was just a way for her to get to where she is now at this point, I think. So for me, it has been such an eye-opening experience. I thought I knew about trafficking, about you know, what goes on. And you know, I grew up in Las Vegas. If anybody should be aware, you know, it should be those of us living here. And we were, you know, we've all just been basically, you know, been fed the same lines that everybody else. Well, you know, it happens, and you know, make jokes, and you know, it turns your thinking around when you realize the violence, the fear that victims of trauma, and especially sexual trauma, are you know, have in their life. It's just staggering. And the realization that this is happening in our own backyards. This is happening to, you know, your daughter's friend who's playing soccer. You just don't have any idea how much of this is in your neighborhood and in your city and in your community. And for me, that's been a real eye-opener, and that's something that I hope that the film will help bring forward. That you know, everybody just needs to be aware. This is not just happening overseas to, you know, to foreign women and children. And it's horrible what's happening all over the world. But what happens is we overlook what's happening in our own neighborhoods. This is a domestic problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that I think has been important to share at this festival, is that we're learning that more and more. And you're right, like when I first started working here, like I didn't know all of this stuff. And as I see more stories, like Amy's stories coming to light, like I'm just blown away and shocked by how little we know and the misinformation that we have. So thank you again for sharing that story. What has the impact been that you guys have seen from sharing this film, but also Amy, especially you do so much work, you know, outside of this film. What kind of impact have you guys seen?
From the film, it's been fabulous actually to see the impact the film has had on people. We've done a lot of screenings, either film festivals or other screenings here in Las Vegas, and had panel discussions or Q&A afterwards. And the people who come up to me every time just amaze me with their bravery, because something in the film seems to set them free, and they come and share with me something that they haven't told anybody else. I mean, that's what I hear over and over, at least once, but usually many more times than that at each screening, is this is the first time I've said this to anybody, but, and then they tell me what happened to them. I think only once, maybe twice, was that story they told me connected to trafficking, but it was something that they were ashamed of. It was other violence, other trauma, but the common theme in that film is shame. And that's what, you know, we felt when we, as it was moving along, that's what we felt. But I didn't know if that's what the audience would get, if they just stick to the trafficking part and not connect it to themselves because of that or not. But like any stories that we do, and you know, in our speeches, that's why we promote telling stories so much when you're doing any public speaking, because it connects you. You don't have to have the same experience at all. It still connects you as a human being. But that's what I think the theme is. I don't think the theme is sex trafficking. I think it's shame and what that does to you and the harm, because that's universal. I still haven't met a person that doesn't have some shame, and it could be something considered very minor and not physical violence or anything, but something that really upset them and stuck with them. And it's all the same, right? Whatever shame is, it's as powerful in one person's life as in another.
If I can add to that, on the theme that Amy was talking about. When I first had the idea of talking to her about the film, it was, to me, in my head, it was like, this is a story about Amy, but it's a story about sex trafficking. And it became abundantly clear very quickly that no, this is a story about a woman who's a survivor, and it almost doesn't matter what the shame and what the trauma is from. Because we, as Amy has indicated, we all carry some kind of shame. Many of us have had some sort of trauma that has changed our lives in some way. It may not be as impactful as, a trafficking issue, but we all, that is a universal message. And I hope that the film makes that clear, that this film is way beyond just being about trafficking. It is about overcoming shame. It's overcoming trauma. It's learning to feel free to own who you are, and not be ashamed.
When we first met, I said just one thing: no stilettos clicking down the sidewalk, because up to then, that was any documentaries I saw or any films I saw on trafficking, even any news reports or anything. That's what it is, right? And that's not going to help anybody figure out how to really solve this problem if that's the visual that they always have, because that's so limited.
Mm-hmm. As someone who watches a lot of films, I can tell you I've seen a lot of that.
A lot of stilettos.
Yeah.
That's when I knew I was safe. Robin looked at me like I was crazy even thinking of that. So I knew it was the right place to be.
It's a valid statement. Well, just to kind of wrap things up here, I would love for you guys to share anything that you want to leave with the audience, anything that they can do, or just especially Amy, like anything that you want to tell someone, maybe someone who's going through something, or people who feel compelled now to support you or your the organization, or a local organization that they have by them. Like, where should they go?
Yeah, this is difficult because you really have to do a lot of homework in each location to find out the right place. There's a lot of places, unfortunately, that this is the hot topic now and has been for the last couple of years. So organizations that don't have any background in this or any expertise are popping up, or people nonprofits that have expertise in other areas are now adding this on. And I just recommend people stay away from that and really do their homework to find a place that uses survivors. First of all, if there's not survivor voices in the organization, they don't have to be the executive director, although there are fabulous ones that are, but if an organization is not respecting and embracing survivor advice, then it's not the right place to be. There's a lot wrong with that. You just have to have that voice. There is an 800 number, or a national number for Polaris. That's the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is 888-3737-888. And they have some information that just in general. There's other Truckers Against Trafficking is a national organization. Their website has some nice videos and some good information that they could look at. But if for local, I would tell them to really do their homework. If they're going to get involved in this, they shouldn't do it just a little bit. It's not an easy issue to work on. It's really not easy. It's not satisfying all the time, because you don't just tell somebody, okay, I'll help you, and they jump out of that life or can get out of that life. It's not satisfying. It's not instant gratification for sure. The thing I always want to point out is everybody could do something that doesn't cost a dime, that doesn't cost any time, and that's to commit to stop victim blaming. Because as long as the victim blaming still goes on, the solution's not going to be able to be found. It's just not. So think it twice next time you're looking at the way a girl's dressed and making fun of her. That could be what her pimp picked out for her. And if she doesn't meet her quota, there's going to be blood all over that outfit that you laughed at. Think about the things that you do that are judging and victim blaming, and commit to stop doing that, and commit to stepping up and saying something, speaking up if somebody in your group says something about it. That's an impact I've seen on people that hear my speeches, that I've had people come up to me and say, I do that, I've done that, I'll never do that again. Because it's just, people are good people. Most people are good people. They just don't know, they just don't know, and they've been fed all these stories and all these stereotypes. So we have to break through that. And to anybody that is still in that life or just a new survivor, I would just definitely want to say that there's hope. There's a huge life out here, and there's a lot of help out there, and not to give up. If you ask one person for help and it's not the right person, keep asking.
That's really important. Thank you. Robin, do you want to share the film's website? I know that has a lot of information on it too.
Well, actually, the website that we used for the film is Amy's website. So it's zenspeaker.com. Yeah?
Zenspeaker.com.
Zenspeaker.com. And the film information is there. The film is now available on Amazon. So anybody who is not lucky enough to see it right now during the festival, or have people that they want to have see it later, it is available on Amazon. And for us, of course, the best thing is the more people that see it, the more people that meet Amy through the film, the more the information is disseminated, and hopefully the message will be changed, because we all have to be proactive with changing the message, and changing our language, how we talk about people, is one of the easiest and first steps that everyone can take. And I highly recommend doing it, just being a little more conscious of how we react to people and how we talk about them.
And I have a favor to ask. If people that watched it did enjoy it, if they would go on Amazon and leave a review, that would be so helpful to us. You don't have to have watched it on Amazon to leave a review, and that helps it move up on the what to watch list so that more people can see it. So that'd be very helpful. And my final thing is, one of the, you asked about the impact that it's had. One of my favorite impacts it's had is a philanthropist here and a friend of Robin's and mine came to my classes afterwards and met a couple of survivors who were in my class and heard them speak, and they saw the process that they have to go through to figure out what part of their story they want to tell, how they can tell it comfortably but compellingly. And she was very touched by that. And so she's endowed my business with a nice sum of money to be able to provide scholarships to any survivor, provider, or advocate that wants to take my classes or work one-on-one with me. So, and that doesn't have to be here, it can be through Zoom. So I just like to get that word out so that we can take advantage of that gift from her.
And they can contact Amy through the website, thezenspeaker.com.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I'm glad you have support like that. It's really essential to this work. I'll put all of these resources and links in the film description on the film page on Eventive, so you guys can go straight there if you want to learn more or support. But thank you guys so much for joining me with this. This was a really powerful conversation. I don't even know how to go about the rest of my day now, so thank you.
Thanks for having us.
But I really appreciate you guys. So thank you so much.
Happy to be here and very happy to be part of the festival. Thank you for
Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you.